Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint by Sing Shong. Chapter 19. Shadowkeeper. Part 1. Then I will let everyone take care of it. Yahahit. The Dakibi said these words and disappeared. A food penalty and survival penalty. I already knew about the former penalty. However, the latter wasn't in the original ways of survival. Maybe my contract with Baihyung caused this development. Young Hee-won confirmed that the biscuit in her pocket had disappeared and asked, in a soft voice. Doc Jessi, did you perhaps know something like this would happen? I did expect it. I thought about what the Dakibis would do first to harass humans. Aren't you really good at making predictions? I called Lee Hyun-sung and the others over. The situation was created and now it was time to move. Give back our food. How did this happen? The people of the marginalized group were crying. Cheon In-ho and the mainstream group were also devastated by the sudden food shortage. My eyes met Cheon In-ho's, who bit his lip. Perhaps, were you aware of it? No, that is impossible. If I could read his thoughts, then that's what he would be thinking. You have accurately read the thoughts of character Cheon In-ho. Your understanding of the character Cheon In-ho has increased. My understanding rose from this sort of thing? I looked at other people's expressions and tried to guess what they were thinking. But the previous messages didn't pop up. Meanwhile, Cheon In-ho quickly gathered the people together in order to organize the chaos. Everyone, gather together. I will give you an emergency notice. The contents of the notice were simple. The situation had become worse, so more scouts from the marginalized group was needed. They had to hurry. Now there was no food underground. We won't distribute food to people who don't participate as scouts. Despite the hardline declaration, there was no backlash from the citizens. No, they couldn't. It was an inevitable result in this situation. The people noticed it and volunteered to be scouts, one by one. Despite the disappearance of the food, hope remained on Cheon In-ho's face. As the situation became worse, more control was passed on to the mainstream group. Lee Hyun-sung became anxious when he saw this and opened his mouth. Doc Jessi, what now? Of course, we have to go and get food. The expressions of the party members became tense at these words. Obtain food. This meant only one thing. Then we have to be scouts? There is still food remaining above ground. Nope, we won't go above ground. If we go there, we will unconditionally die. I looked at a gas mask on the floor. This tattered gas mask couldn't stop the poisonous fog. But we need to obtain food above ground. Lee Hyun-sung SSI. The world has changed. Then the food needs to change. I looked at the tunnel to Yaksu Station. Wait a minute. Doc Jessi, don't tell me? That's right. In this world, humans were no longer the top predators. Even if we weren't predators, we didn't necessarily have to be prey. We will hunt monsters. After a while, several people from the marginalized group, including myself, were standing in front of the tunnel towards Yaksu Station. I see. You are going to enter the railway track? I thought Cheon In-ho would challenge us when we refused to join the scouting group, but he seemed relieved that I was out of the group. He might think I was a threat to his own power. Well, looking at it in the long run, a team dedicated to attacking the scenario is required. Come back safely. He was a funny guy. He spoke like he was the captain. But the time for him to be finished wasn't far off. Your understanding of the character Cheon In-ho has increased. Your understanding of the character Cheon In-ho has reached a certain level. I see. I got it now. There were two major cases of character understanding rising. One was when I got the liking or trust of the character. The second was when I accurately guessed what the character was thinking. Maybe now was the latter case. The character Cheon In-ho is suspicious of you. According to the accumulated understanding value, a vague idea of the person's emotions could be obtained. Oh, can one of my group members join? I'd like to get some information on the attack. Indeed, Cheon In-ho wouldn't let us go so easily. I stared at the man behind him. It was the person who would go with us, and an unlucky fellow. I have to go with them? Why else are you here, Han Hyung? Didn't you want to reconcile with Dr. Sasai last night? That. Cheon In-ho's party member who joined us was department head Han Myung-go. Dr. Sasai. If you don't mind, I will go. I understand. Let's go together. Han Myung-go was surprised when I responded readily. He thought I would refuse. Lee Hyun-sung had a worried face, but I had an idea. In any case, the survivors' party of 5 people from carriage 3807, consisting of me, Lee Hyun-sung, Lee Gil-young, Yu Sang-ga, and Han Myung-go was reformed. Can I come as well? Is it okay even if your body isn't fully healed? This much is fine. There was one more. Including Young Hee-won, there was a total of 6 people in the party. It was a lot for a small number. Of course, the number of people wasn't much in front of the upcoming crisis. A new sub-scenario has arrived. Plus. Second scenario, food acquisition, category, sub. Difficulty, E. Clear conditions, directly hunt the monsters that can be used as food and cook them. Time limit, none. Compensation, 500 coins failure? Plus. As soon as they stepped foot in the tunnel, a sub-scenario flew in. Food acquisition. It was a sub-scenario we had to go through before entering the second main scenario. A few constellations are anticipating your performance. The darkness of the tunnel became apparent before we even moved 10 steps. I lit up the tunnel with a flashlight, but the outline of the surrounding area wasn't visible at all. It was proof of a curtain that was blocking the light. The real thing would be beyond this curtain. Dr. Sasai, wait a minute. It is really dangerous from here on. Young Hee-won, who walked beside me, stopped first. Are we really going this way? No matter how I look, it seems like suicide. There is also Gil-young. In fact, I was concerned from the beginning. It isn't too late, so how about we leave Gil-young behind? And if possible, the women. Lee Hyun-sung Sasai, I'm not as good as you, but I know how to fight. I took some kendo lessons. But an unnecessary controversy was about to heat up the atmosphere, so I interrupted. Lee Hyun-sung Sasai. I told you before. The world has changed. It is biased that a woman is physically weak. Right now, everyone can become stronger by raising their stats. But Young Hee-won Sasai, there is also a problem with your words. What is it? Just as a woman isn't weak, a child also isn't weak. Gil-young, show them. Lee Gil-young came forward. He looked around for a while before sitting on the tunnel floor and reaching out his hand. Young Hee-won's eyes widened. Oh my god, what is that? Shit. Cockroaches? Han Myung-go cried out with fear. The cockroach that appeared in the distance was connected to Lee Gil-young's fingertips with a faint solid line. The cockroach listened to Lee Gil-young's words like a well-behaved dog and disappeared into the darkness. My attribute is Insect Collector. Insect Collector. Lee Gil-young possessed the rare ability to communicate simply with insects through his diverse communication skill. This is nothing in front of us. It is safe for 100 steps forward. Lee Gil-young showed an overwhelming scouting power and the other people made a stunned expression. Lee Gil-young spoke to them with a bold expression. Thank you for your concern. But I didn't follow all of you for you to take care of me. Ah, yes. Young Hee-won nodded with a sour expression. Lee Gil-young came to my side and I stroked his hair. Lee Gil-young's attribute hadn't been seen in the original Ways of Survival. It wasn't a wrong choice to save Lee Gil-young in the beginning. We passed a clear barrier and entered the full-fledged darkness. You have entered a dangerous area. Why you Sangha SSI? It is dangerous to hold my hand while walking. Aren't you more afraid than I am? And no. The air inside the curtain was sticky from the humidity. Reduce the light. Yusenga immediate covered the flashlight. Since this model didn't have a light control function, she had to adjust the light with her hand. Ouch. Don't shine it downwards. Young Hee-won felt nauseous when she checked the ground. There were torn bodies. The bodies of those who tried to move through here were arranged at their feet. Yusenga closed her eyes tightly, Han Myung-go shook, and even the bold Lee Hyun-sung started sweating. Lee Gil-young was surprisingly calm, with not the slightest bit of fear on his face. I felt a bit worried. This guy, did he think it was all a game? There is something that isn't human. As Lee Gil-young said, it wasn't only the bodies of humans on the ground. There was something the size of a fully grown wolf. The bodies of the mole-like creatures were scattered all over the place. The 9th grade underground species, the ground rat. It was a name reminiscent of bug on Earth, but a name was just a name. They were underground piranhas. The ground rats were persistent hunters who burrowed through the ground in groups and aimed at their prey. However, the ground rats collapsed like they had received a bombardment. Young Hee-won sighed. Who the hell did this? Obviously, there was only one human who could turn the ground rats into this. Yoo Jong-hyuk. He proceeded to the next station through this path alone. But I couldn't help wondering. Originally, it was supposed to be tonight or tomorrow when the third turn Yoo Jong-hyuk moved to the next station. Why was he so hasty? Did he become impatient? What was the reason? Doc SSI, can we use this for food? The scenario said that we have to hunt it ourselves, so maybe it isn't possible. Well, it is kind of uncomfortable. What about cooking? Do you want to bake it on a fire? It could be baked. The problem was that it must be a special fire. Hee-won SSI, you said you were good at kendo? It is a bit much to say I am good, but what are you doing now? I stabbed the body of the ground rat and started to cut it with a knife. I didn't know when I read it in the novel, but it didn't go as well as I thought. After somehow getting rid of the tough skin, I managed to remove the spine bones. This was the first time, so I left many scratches, but it was usable. Why are you taking that? You need a weapon for kendo. The stone hog's thorn wasn't enough, but the spine of the ground rat consisted of a single bone, making it a pretty good weapon at the beginning of the scenario. After cutting the cartilage leading to the leg and shaping it, the bone actually took the shape of a knife. I gave it to Young Hee-won. Thank you. Suddenly, I feel like I'm back to the Paleolithic age. You need to grind it a bit more for it to be useful. There are rocks around, so skillfully grind the blade. Hoo-hoo, understood. Captain. Young Hee-won started to grind the blade with a slightly excited voice. I looked up and saw Lee Hyun-sung watching the scene with a bit of envy. Do you want one? You will make me one? All of you come closer. It is better if you learn how to do it. Let's make it together. In fact, this was also my first time trying it. I wouldn't have been able to do it if the details hadn't been included in Ways of Survival. Why wasn't Ways of Survival popular? It was simple. The author wrote too much of the setting. Doc SSI, you are a beginner, but you were good at it. We sat down and made weapons together. This time it was a spear, not a sword. They didn't have the kendo skill, so I decided it was more stable to make a long spear. Li Hyunsung's spear was made with the spine of the largest ground rat, while Yu Senga and Han Myunggua's weapons were made with the spine of average-sized ground rats. Finally, Li Giliang's weapon was made with the head bone of a young ground rat. You have succeeded in acquiring weapons by yourself. A very small number of constellations are interested in the primitive nature of humanity. The constellations have sponsored you 100 coins. Everyone received these messages. We receive coins even for this type of thing. I don't want you to die. You have your own coins? Yes, we do. Whenever possible, leave enough coins for the survival cost and invest the rest in your strength, stamina, and agility. Otherwise, you won't survive. I'll keep that in mind. We finished the preparations and started to move forward again. The 100 steps that Li Giliang mentioned was right in front of us now. The sub-scenario, food acquisition, has begun. The ground rats crawled out from the ground. I quickly counted the numbers. 1, 2, 3, there were exactly 13. It was more than I thought. Grr. The group of land rats drew a line and started threatening us. The moment we crossed the line, the fight would begin. There is no plan. We are beginners. It might sound cruel, but honestly, I don't expect you to survive. That. Still, all of you survive. Please. Han Myunggu was the only upset one in the party. Everyone else was nervous, but looked determined. In particular, Young Heewon's eyes were very impressive. Okay, let's try it. Everybody, please live. Just as Yu Jongguk tested me, I also had expectations for them. No matter how good a mentor, a person who wasn't determined couldn't survive in this world. In the end, it was up to a person to save themselves. Everyone should use this opportunity to realize it clearly. Then let's go. I also knew who I must take among these people. As we took one more step, the ground rats moved. The battle began. Chapter 20. Shadowkeeper. Part 2. The party fought well. It was actually a little bit surprising. In particular, Li Hyunsung and Young Heewon, who stepped forward with me, were very influential. The battle composition naturally became the three of us in front, with the other three in the rear. Less than a minute after the battle began, a few ground rats were stuck on the ground with their necks pierced. Li Hyunsung overpowered another ground rat, wiped the sweat on his forehead, and said, "I think I can live." Once they raised their overall stats, the human race wasn't that weak. Even so, Li Hyunsung's mentality was very special in this world. A normal human couldn't be so nonchalant when encountering monsters. There was a reason why he got the name of Steel Sword in the future. However, the more amazing person was Young Heewon. The pattern is simpler than I thought? Maybe it was due to the kendo skill, but every time her sword stretched out, the ground rat was cut somewhere on their legs or tail. Hap. It was a case where Young Heewon invested most of her coins into strength. Her endurance declined due to it, but the power of one blow was better than I thought. Wike. Her sword moved in a terrifying manner through the air. Damn, I lost one. Please. Her voice trembled as she spoke. Her only weakness was that her stamina was low, so her endurance fell. Grr. The ground rats who moved between the party members were moderately smart. After succeeding in scattering the ranks, they ran towards the opponent who seemed the weakest using a hunter's instincts. Leave it to me. However, the ground rats didn't know that they had picked the wrong opponent. Piak. A blunt instrument thrown by Li Giliang's hands struck the head of a ground rat. The impact was lacking because he was a child, but it was enough. The others could help him finish it. Puke. Yu Senga's spear pierced the body of the ground rat. The ground rat twisted several times. Yu Senga made a confused expression, but she didn't remove her hand from the spear. The ground rat lost its energy and fell down. I honestly thought it would be difficult for Yusenga to adapt, but I was really surprised. Usually, it was normal to panic like Han Myungo standing over here. As the people were struggling, one person was hiding in the rear. He couldn't even hide properly and was bleeding near the shins. I pierced the last ground rat with the thorn and the surroundings became quiet. I shook the blood off the thorn and looked at everyone. Everyone suffered from minor abrasions except for Han Myungo, but there were no major injuries. It was a great first victory. Yusenga and Li Gilyung relaxed and sat down, while Li Hyunsung stabbed his spear into the ground and wiped at the sweat on his forehead. Young Hee-won lamented as she counted the number of ground rats in the vicinity. Doc Jesasai, how many did you take care of? 4 of them. Che, I killed 2. I got 3. My pride was somehow hurt when I heard Li Hyunsung's proud declaration. There was only one difference despite my stats. I used a skill and looked at Li Hyunsung's attributes window. Plus. Character information, name, Li Hyunsung, age, 28 years old. Constellation sponsor, Master of Steel. Private attribute, soldier who turned a blind eye to injustice, general. Exclusive skills, bayonet skills LV2, camouflage LV1, patience LV1, sense of justice LV1, weapons training LV2. Stigma, great mountain push LV1. Overall stats, stamina LV12, strength LV9, agility LV9, magic power LV6. Overall evaluation, the moment of the attribute evolution is gradually approaching. The person's trust in you is considerable. The sponsor behind him is wary towards you. Asterisk starter pack is currently applied. Plus. The starter pack. This was why he was strong. The Master of Steel seemed to quite like Li Hyunsung. The starter pack was a coin package that could be used when the average overall stats of the incarnation was less than level 10. It was a good item that allowed you to learn weapons training, a useful skill in the beginning, while raising the level of the overall stats by 1. Considering the fact that most incarnations were being exploited for nothing, Li Hyunsung was lucky to receive the starter pack. Doc Jesasai, your complexion doesn't look good, no. I was just thinking for a moment. Now I was a little bit envious, well, I had the money to buy it. I didn't buy it. My average stats exceeded level 10, so buying it would only damage me. Damn, I opened the Dakibi bag a bit early. Let's gather up the ground rats. We need to prepare today's food. By the way, how will we cook it? We can't eat it like this. We can't eat it now, but there will be a way. I guessed I answered too calmly. There was silence among my party members. Li Hyunsung was the first one to open his mouth. Excuse me, I would like to ask you one thing. Yes? Doc Jesasai, perhaps, do you know something about this situation? Whoops, I made a mistake. That. Suddenly, I remembered the regressors in the novel I read, followed by Yu Jonghyuk's words. It was like this. The feeling of a regressor. Usually, these types of things happen to a regressor. Some replies came to mind. I could shamelessly say that it was a hunch, or I could lie like Yu Jonghyuk. The constellation secretive plotter is anticipating your choice. A few constellations are anticipating your answer. But from a reader's point of view, the best answer was Aok. It was to create a situation where I didn't need to say anything. The constellation secretive plotter nods at your choice. There is still one left. Young Hee-won shouted and Li Hyunsung ran. However, the action of the hidden ground rats was faster than anyone else. It was much bigger than the other creatures. Save me. It dragged Han Myungo into a tunnel by one of his legs. The nearest Jusanga swung her spear, but the situation got worse because Han Myungo held on to her. "Grab this." Li Hyunsung stretched out the handle of his spear, but it only hit the ground. The ground rat and the two people had already disappeared into the ground. The constellation prisoner of the golden headband resents this frustrating person. Yong Hee-won burst out. "Ah. I knew I was going to get cancer because of that uncle. I'm sorry. I was too late." Li Hyunsung spoke in a sad voice. I tapped his shoulder to show it was okay. No one could have done anything. Should we chase after them? I looked at the hole where they had disappeared. It wasn't an ordinary hole. There was a touch of energy around it. The darkness gave off a gloomy feeling. I retreated to the back and turned on my smartphone. There was only 5% battery remaining. At dawn, I exchanged one battery charge for food with a person from the marginalized group. Your reading speed has increased due to the effect of the exclusive attribute. Shortly afterwards, I was able to find the desired passage. The edge of darkness is the habitat of the ground rats and is a type of subspace emitted from the dark root. The ground rats that breathe in black ether instead of oxygen don't grow naturally unless they are near the edge of darkness. It was a fact that I knew roughly, but it was meaningful to review it. That's right. This was the entrance to the edge of darkness. I read about it and put the smartphone in my pocket. "Doc SSI?" Li Hyunsung was looking at me with a frustrated expression. I nodded. "We will enter." Then. But it's very dangerous to enter with a lot of people. Li Hyunsung SSI and Yong Hee-won SSI will wait here at the boundary. If something happens, I will give you a signal. The startled Yong Hee-won asked. Surely, you don't intend to go with only Gilyoung? Gilyoung's ability will be helpful in pursuing them. The moment she tried to strongly resist, I raised a hand and called to Li Hyunsung. Li Hyunsung SSI. Yong Hee-won SSI isn't in a good condition, so please take care of her. Li Hyunsung seemed to realize something. I understand. Wait a minute. I am fine. Yong Hee-won, confidence is good, but don't be reckless. Yong Hee-won's breathing was uneven. She wasn't completely healed from the poisonous fog. I left the two people and entered the hole with Lee Gilyoung. It was obviously a hole that was dug down in a vertical slope. But as soon as we entered, we could stand as if gravity was in effect. It was due to the magic power emitted by the edge of darkness. This way. The darkness was so deep that I couldn't see anything, so I could only move forward with Lee Gilyoung. Black ether had the property of absorbing light, making a flashlight meaningless. If Lee Gilyoung's ability diverse communication wasn't available, I might have to use coins again. Excuse me Hyung. Lee Gilyoung called out to me. Did you do it on purpose? What? When that uncle grabbed Nuna and a juicy, you let it go. I had a moment of hesitation. In the darkness, Lee Gilyoung's fingertips were strange. Before I could ask how he knew, Lee Gilyoung spoke. At that time I was looking at Hyung's face. He was watching me even in those short moments. A very scary kid. It was no good hiding from a person who was so quick. Yes, that's right. The answer was terrible and a message bomb was set off in my head. Indeed, this was a spectacle for the constellations. The constellations of absolute good frown at your cruelty. The constellation secretive plotter is pressing you with shining eyes. Why did you do that? Because of the habit of the ground rats. I decided to answer honestly. The ground rats have a habit of keeping their catches in the same place as their treasure. It isn't just food. Many things that seem rare are gathered. For example, an item. However, the paths are so complicated that it can't be found unless I follow their path directly. Lee Gilyoung was silent for a moment. I continued speaking. I expected them to take Han Myungo. I didn't expect him to grab onto Usanga. Then your purpose isn't to save Nuna or Ajusi, it is the items? Yes. Are you disappointed? Nope. Lee Gilliang's small hand gripped my finger tightly. Hyung shouldn't lie. If Hyung was such a person, you wouldn't have saved me on the subway. I believe in you. Lee Gilliang didn't act like a child, but he was still a child. Lee Gilliang didn't know. To be mature and to be an adult were completely different things. Some constellations are touched to tears. 200 coins have been sponsored. In this world, there were mean adults who would take advantage of such maturity. The hole was longer than I thought, and we had to go downwards for quite a long time. Hyung. Yes. Hyung, are you a god? What? Or the main character? Children sometimes asked sharp questions. It was because they lived in a world where stories and reality weren't clearly distinguished. Lee Gilliang didn't know exactly what his question meant. I'm not a main character. Rather, I always envy the main character. But you still know something about this world? I thought for a moment before replying. That's right. Then I'll ask you one thing. I will answer it if I can. Once we clear all these scenarios, can we make a wish? Wish? I was a bit confused. Usually there is a reward at the end of these stories. At the end of this story, is there something like that? In the darkness, Lee Gilliam's breathing was trembling. Lee Gilliam's expression when he saw his dead mother suddenly came to mind. Those who adapted to this world suffered from it in different ways. Some were crazy, some were fanatics, and some had irrational optimism. Yes, there is. I was grateful that this place was dark. It was because Lee Gilliang couldn't see my face right now. We are almost there, Hyung. The surrounding black ether was shrinking rapidly. It was evidence that Dark Root was nearby. I tensed up and gripped the thorn. A few constellations are holding their breaths. I heard the sound of the ground rats somewhere in the ground. As the sound got closer, the sense of space expanded rapidly. I saw a light in the darkness, as if someone had lit a fire. Then I saw a tattered box beyond that light. The moment I was convinced that I had come to the right place, messages rang in my ears. The sub-scenario has been updated. You have entered the ground rat's treasure trove.